Hello. Give you, well, I appreciate that. It depends what size dictionary you look at, I guess. Well, I'm glad that I stimulated some further research by the press corps. This is always good. At any rate, welcome, and welcome to the group that's arriving, whatever it is. I have two announcements. The first is that Secretary Cohen and General Shelton will accompany President Clinton and Secretary Albright and others to Brussels in Germany tomorrow. They're actually leaving early this evening, and they will visit with the NATO Secretary General Solana, as well as General Clark tomorrow in Brussels, and then from there they'll visit two air bases, Spangdahlem and Ramstein, both in Germany, to talk with fighter pilots and commanders at Spangdahlem, and then to talk with the people who are actually loading the humanitarian aid and sending it down to Macedonia and Albania at Ramstein. Secretary Cohen will come back tomorrow night, and President Clinton will continue on in Germany. Second, I want to bring you up to date on what the military is doing to support the rescue, relief, and rebuilding efforts after the tornadoes in Oklahoma and Kansas. There are approximately 200 Air Force Reserve and Navy volunteers from Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma supporting the search and rescue efforts in and around Del City. They've set up shelters for those who've lost their homes. Their team of 10 disaster response specialists from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, have been on duty as of early last night assisting the Federal Emergency Management Agency in coordinating the rescue efforts and help efforts. There are also approximately 873 Oklahoma Air and Army National Guard troops, as well as 115 members of the Kansas National Guard mobilized last night to help in the operation. There were no aircraft hurt at Tinker Air Force Base, although some buildings were hurt. The storm narrowly missed Tinker Air Force Base. And with that, I'll take your questions or turn it over to General Wald, who has a crackerjack briefing today.
Ken, can you give us any more on the shoot down on the MiG-29 and also on the progress on the call-up of the aircraft, up to 300 aircraft?
I have, there's nothing more to say on the call-up of the aircraft, nothing new to say, because they're still being evaluated, and I think I'll turn over the MiG-29 shoot-down to General Wald, and that'll be a good segue into his briefing.
Yeah.
Yes?
We were to ask you about the 3 American soldiers. I mean, it's clear that something happened to them. They got hurt in some fashion, but as yet the Army hasn't told us how they got hurt. Do you know how they got hurt, and would you please tell us?
No, I do not know how they got hurt. I can tell you that the debriefing of the soldiers has been methodical and sequential. And basically the first part has been medical. They've been examined thoroughly. They've spoken to physicians. And they have not really done a lot of debriefing with other people to give a minute-by-minute account of what happened to them.
I'm sorry, this is not credible. When a guy has cracked ribs and a broken nose, you don't ask him how that happened?
I don't know what happened.
Does anybody in this building know?
I assume they do. I've asked the Army for that information, and I do not have it.
What does the Army tell you?
The Army says, we'll get back to you. So when we get the information, you'll get the information. I think it is reasonable to assume that we'd like to give a complete picture of what's happened and not something that may turn out not to be complete by the time we finish. But all of this will be out in due time.
For the record, if the Army reads this thing, I just find that ludicrous.
I understand. We'll talk about the MiG shoot-down.
Good afternoon. I'll mention the MiG shoot-down first and just explain it to you. What I understand is that today F-16 CJ, which is a harm-shooting aircraft, but also carries air-to-air missiles for self-defense and for flying combat air patrol. In conjunction with EA-6 type aircraft for jamming, we're protecting a strike package that was going into the middle of Serbia around Bačenica airfield on a target. During egress, the F-16 detected an aircraft in the vicinity of the strike package as it was exiting. It determined it was a hostile aircraft, identified it, and then shot it down. And after that, they all egressed the area safely. So this is the first time they've had an air-to-air engagement since the third day, I think it was, on 27 April. So,
Where was it near, you said?
Bačenica airfield. So you have to assume that's probably where it came from, Bačenica.
Where did the F-16 come from?
The F-16 was out of Aviano, but it wasn't home base there.
It's a MiG-29, does that show up?
There's various ways to do that, and some with your eyeballs, and there's other means.
Help from AWACS at all?
I'm not sure if that's the case or not, and I wouldn't talk to that right now.
What kind of missile shot it down?
It was from what I understand, it was a radar missile.
And you believe it was not going to Bosnia, it was going after the strike package?
We assume it was going after the strike package.
And where did it go down exactly?
It went down in the same vicinity. I think it was a couple of miles from the border of Bosnia, if I'm not mistaken.
How long the engagement lasted?
Not very long.
Did he even get close to the strike package?
No, he did not close enough to fire anything at him, no.
Do you know whether the MiG pilot ejected? Or?
I'm not sure if he did or not. There's another MiG-29 and a Galeb that was attacked on the ground yesterday and destroyed as well.
Did MiG-29 ever try any evasive action or anything?
I'm not sure if, I don't have the details or if he maneuvered or not.
How many MiG-29s does that leave them, you know?
I think there's around 4 left.
4 left?
That's not a 15, isn't it?
I think they had 14 or 15, right? A couple of those are trainers, so the ones they have left probably are maybe in the trainer model too. Okay, the weather today has been pretty good. It's getting a little worse this afternoon. I just thought you might want to see the projection for the next 3 months out. It looks like the weather will start improving incrementally over the next 3 months, and into July it should start being pretty good. So as the next few months go on and this continues on, the weather should improve, and that will give us more days like we had over the last few days. Yesterday, 41 fixed targets struck, much of that in the Kosovo area on fielded forces. A significant amount of those, about 50% of the actual fixed targets yesterday were in that area. Once again, some mobility, command and control, radio relay, and some other SAM type sites were struck yesterday.
What does the mobility refer to?
Mobility could be a lock, that would be a line of, that would be a bridge type target.
How many targets again? I'm sorry.
There were 41 fixed. But as I'm showing here on this chart, there are actually 80 total, because as we've increased the ops tempo and started to change the way we operate a little bit, where we're hitting fielded forces and you're hitting targets of opportunity, which I'll show you several films today of those. Some of those targets that wouldn't be necessarily fixed would be maybe a SAM launcher or a truck or an APC of some sort, or even maybe a fielded force or other targets that could come up on the screen through various sources throughout the day. So started out planning to hit about 41 targets and actually ended up hitting 80 plus yesterday. 606 sorties yesterday, and this is only a smattering of the type of aircraft, but we flew the B-52, B-1, B-2, F-117, as well as all the NATO aircraft of all types flew yesterday, as well as all the support aircraft. So it was a big day, and so it looks like we're getting into that part of the campaign where we'll sustain a very high level of ops tempo for the foreseeable future, really.
B-52s drop dumb bombs?
We don't have any dumb bombs. We have gravity bombs.
Sorry.
Yes, they did.
Pardon me, they did.
Yeah. Well, it's a big distinction, because the point is that people envision what happened in Vietnam all the time with these bombs dropping down in a mile and a half area. These bombs are dropping on targets that are appropriate for it, and the footprint's about 1,000 feet long. Once again, we go back through because of the avionics and the GPS, so.
It's basically because the navigation of the aircraft is so much better than it was.
That's correct.
And they did drop those as opposed to have-navs.
That's right. The locks themselves, once again, I just showed this the other day, but we continue to hit. We had a question the other day where that was, that river and such, where there's a river here you can see coming down. And these large areas here in yellow are the major locks that we've hit. And all along all of these, there are several other bridges that we continue to strike, and I'll show you some of those today. So the idea here is to cut him off into Kosovo, to keep from him able to sustain or resupply his forces, depart and come back. And as was mentioned the other day by Mr. Bacon, these bridges down here remain open. I thought you'd be interested in what a schedule looks like in a generic fashion throughout the day. This is a 24-hour period. From here, it's 0300 in the morning out to 0300 the next day. And this is just a synopsis of generally how the missions will go all day and how that schedule goes. And you can see up here, they'll have surveillance generally throughout the day, refueling at some time, sometimes more than a little more refueling that might match up where the package is a little larger here. Intelligence of all sorts, and then combat air patrol. As we talked about just a moment ago, one of those aircraft, although this was not a dedicated combat air patrol, but it performed that type of mission where we shot down the MiG-29 yesterday. Those will stay in the area and protect all the forces. And then various types of intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, in this case a Predator. I'll show you some film of that a little bit later of a strike. And that goes on 24 hours a day, and it just keeps rolling and keeps rolling. So that's how we're flying the sorties over the period of time we are now. And you can see that as this grows, these sorties down here, some of the tankers we talked about coming in, that will allow us to have even a double batch of strikers here. Possibly we'll have more tankers, and that will give us a chance to be more responsive to targets that we could find fielded of targets of opportunity and keep them from moving around.
So you haven't yet had a thing where you've had 5 strike packages overlapping with coverage the entire day, have you? Like that?
This is a generic. There have been all types. There have been times where there have been strike packages on top of each other, maybe 2 or 3 or 4. There have been times where there's one, but there generally are aircraft in the area ready to attack nearly 24 hours a day now.
That one shows, it does show 24 hours overlap about, I would say, about half the day.
And that's
with
once
2.
again generic. Don't take this as an actual schedule. It changes all the time. Just remember there's aircraft out there around the clock. Quickly on the refugees, they still are departing. UNHCR has come up with a little better estimate on the firearm. There's about 193,000 refugees there, a couple thousand over the last 2 days, both there in Albania. And the camp at Camp Hope, America, continues to be built. Plans are for another 20,000 person camp is in the planning right now with the potential for a third. That would be 60,000 people in camps in Albania. Just some imagery. This is a Bela Planka communication site in Serbia itself. You see 3 fairly good-sized buildings. These red buildings were the 2 that were attacked. Next slide. And you can see that in the post-strike imagery, those 2 buildings are gone, plus a radio relay site antenna was gone, has been destroyed there, so that particular site is down. Beograd petroleum production area, you can see some of the post-strike imagery of some of the larger tanks have been destroyed and burned. This building over here has been attacked, and there's still, during this imagery, there was a transloading area that still remains. The Valjevo ammunition plant in Krusek, Serbia, and all these arrows, I won't point out all of them, but all these buildings have been hit, and methodically that his ability to resupply ammunition or even to produce it has gone down dramatically. Another picture of the same area. It's a big target. You can see some of that over there we showed earlier. You can see in all these areas here the buildings are destroyed. Some had ammunition in them, some are production. There's another explosive storage facility, and you can see that some of these targets have several aim points. Many of these have been hit. Most of those are the ones that they would determine beforehand would be the most likely one to have the ammunition in them. A pontoon bridge here as kind of a workaround over the Danube. Most of their bridges are down. They're starting to try to build one here. We'll keep an eye on that. This is a border post that I'll show you a film last night that we hit this with an LGB along the Albanian border. There's a large structure. It was hit several times, and that's been destroyed. This is a tank, once again fuzzied up a little bit, but you can see under this right here there's an actual tank. You can see where the treads were, and that was over the last couple nights. The tank in Kosovo destroyed. We have several films today. The last one will be actually Predator film of an actual strike last night, watching a F-14 off the TR hit a flat-face radar. First one is a petroleum tank car. He continues to try to move his fuel around in Kosovo in tank cars, disperse them. As we find them, we hit them and destroy them. You can see the tank cars actually leaked a little bit before this, so it helped us find the target. And we'll continue to not only cut off his petroleum production, destroy that, but cut off any he has fielded as we find it. Ammunition storage in northern Kosovo. It's an F-16. This is under a camouflaged area, made it harder to find. This is actually dispersed ammunition in Kosovo itself. You see a large secondary, so there was quite a bit of ammunition under that camouflage. Here's some artillery pieces in northern Kosovo. 3 D-30 artillery pieces. I'll point them out on the film. You'll see these. This is an F-16 with a laser-guided bomb. Takes out the middle one, probably just damages the other ones. We can't sure, but for sure the middle one was destroyed. Military vehicles in western Serbia. This is an F-15E with an optically guided bomb. This is a military vehicle in a storage area. You'll see there's a little work area, house by these vehicles. It actually hits the building, a small building, and post-strike imagery showed all 3 of those vehicles destroyed. Self-propelled artillery on the Kosovo-Serbian border. F-16 with this is actually a FAC, and he's marking, this is not the instrument, he's just filming this. He actually is using his heads-up display in his cockpit, and he'll shoot 2 rockets off, mark this, and then 2 other aircraft will come in and destroy it. You see the rockets come off. So a forward air controller many times will mark the target with white phosphorus rockets. Here's a tank in western Kosovo. F-16 with a laser-guided bomb. You can see that they're putting their tanks in and around built-up areas. It's T-55. And it misses a little bit to the left, but as you see, and you'll have to watch close, but the tank is burning as he pulls off here. You can see some of the burning down here. So that probably was damaged heavily. Whether it's destroyed or not, we wouldn't count that as a destroyed tank yet. I wouldn't want to be in the tank. There's another tank close to that one. And once again, as you go down the numbers, this is one of the reasons we don't give a lot of numbers, because I think if you're a practical man saying taking your chances in that tank is not a good idea, but we still don't count it as destroyed yet. Same area you can see above that in the black spot over there is where the other tank was, up right into this area here. That one looks like it had a direct hit, but once again, until we have better imagery, we can't tell if it was destroyed or not. I would say there's a very good chance it was probably destroyed. I doubt if it's going to drive off, but once again, we don't count that as destroyed yet. There's a border post. Once again, we continue to take out their border posts along the Albanian border. This is in southern Kosovo. This is the image I showed you on the chart, or the picture a moment ago. Large area had been hit earlier, and this one has a fairly large explosion, and that building is destroyed. A radio relay site in southern Serbia, F-16 with laser-guided bomb again, day before yesterday. Take out his ability to command and control. I doubt very seriously if he has any idea how bad he's being hit right now. And I doubt if the people in the field are reporting up very good to him. They're probably a little bit concerned about telling the truth. Once again, that radio relay site is taken out. His command and control is more and more difficult for him to communicate with the fielded forces. A low-blow radar. This is in conjunction with a SAM, SA-3 type radar, F-15E with an optically guided bomb. You'll actually see the truck on here. You can almost read the license plate at the end game on this one. He's working hard to get it. Actually, I'll take that back. This is actually camouflaged. You can see here, and he takes that out. I have another one later that shows the truck. That one was destroyed. Vranje Highway Bridge, Kosovo. There's 2 shots here. Both of them hit the bridge, and neither one of them dropped the bridge, and that's why we have to go back sometimes. F-16 with laser-guided bomb. He drops just on the edge of the bridge. You'll see the actual hole on the next film, but the bridge is still up. This is his wingman. 2,000-pound bombs. You can see where the previous one struck, the bridge still up. He's going to try to hit it here. He does. Puts a good-sized hole in the bridge, but the bridge is standing, so it's probably structurally not very sound, but you still get across it with some type walking at least. There's another bridge just about like the ones we just hit earlier, and this will give you an example. This bridge has been hit before. They're going back, and he actually drops the span on this one. It's weakened enough, and you'll see it right above the cursors here in just a moment. You can see the span has dropped, so that bridge is out, and you can see it dropped. These are some of the smaller bridges, so we're taking those out continuously. Pristina Explosive Storage Facility, continue to take out. Pristina is one of his major areas of where he's holding a lot of his ammunition for sustainability. We've hit Pristina a lot. Small secondary there, not very large. Flat face radar and an F-15E with optically guided bomb. This is the one I mentioned earlier. This is an early warning radar, which gives us the ability then, when you take all his radars out, you have a better chance to fly with a little bit less impunity, more impunity, I should say. And you'll see the actual truck as you get closer. You can toast that one. Rakovina Highway Bridge, southwest Kosovo. This is an F-18 off the Theodore Roosevelt. A little different type film. You can see a little not as clear, but underneath there you'll see the bridge. He actually had a direct hit on that bridge. F-15E with an LGB on the airfield control tower. This would be the tower that you'd see around a normal airfield, a military field that would do the actual controlling of the aircraft. Underneath the cursor. And we'll take down part of that airfield's ability to function properly. Prizren TV FM transmitter. Much of their TV, national TV, is down. This is an F-14 off the Theodore Roosevelt with an LGB. A direct hit. And his ability to transmit propaganda over TV is taken down. SA-6 control vehicle, once again, a critical SAM and a critical SAM vehicle. This is in Serbia, F-14 off the Theodore Roosevelt again. Important target. 3 bombs, direct hit. That van is not functional. This is a flat face radar, which is another early warning radar. This is in Serbia itself, in the Kosovo engagement zone, F-14 off the Theodore Roosevelt. And you'll see that there's a pond over here. Keep that pond in mind. He drops it right on the flat face radar. The next film you'll see is a Predator watching this occur last night. The same bomb. This is now a Predator watching and verifying both the target and the strike. It's a little fuzzy. You can see that pond over to the right. Actually, this has been fuzzed up a little bit for this purpose. The target itself is down in this area here. That's the actual bomb hitting it. So that's a destroyed flat face, which is very important.
You said that imagery has been distorted a little bit, slightly, so we can't tell how good it is. Or
well, part of it's distortion, some of it's the changing it over to the film itself. That's all the film. Any questions, Charlie?
The Serbs say that they're still having major power problems, but they indicate that they don't think there were any strikes on power stations. Did you hit any electrical power stations again last night?
No, we did not.
Can you talk about the timing of hitting the, using the bombs on the electrical power stations? Why, at this point in the campaign, you chose to do that?
Well, first of all, I didn't choose it, but Sackler did. But he's got in his mind his campaign, and it made sense for him to do that at that particular time. And as his campaign increases in intensity, there are a multiplicity of different types of targets that are still candidates, and we'll continue to hit those. So we'll continue to strike his ability to perform the repressive acts in Kosovo, and for his military to have any viability on it at all.
How many Serb troops are in Kosovo now? And how many are involved in that defensive perimeters on the Macedonian border?
The numbers are still around 40,000, plus or minus, and once again, we're not counting troops on the ground and if they're destroyed or not. And the numbers up front along the border is, I can't tell you exactly, I'll find out, but it's not the majority of the 40,000 by any means, but there are some up there.
Is that a significant, you don't have an idea how many?
No, I don't.
What were the B-52s used against, and can you give us some idea of the tonnage of bombs that were dropped on those targets?
They dropped, I think, 54 500-pound bombs, and they went against an airfield.
Could you describe for us the extent and condition of Milosevic's network of underground bunkers?
He has an extensive network of underground bunkers, as you know, and we've found some of those and we've attacked some of those. And over the last few days, we've used some bunker busting type weapons, as you know. Again, last night, some of those. So we'll continue to do that as we find those that we think are occupied or useful or important, and we'll continue to attack those.
Many of these were built a long time ago.
Right.
Are they still in good shape, or have they been allowed to decay over the years?
I'm not sure what the definition of good shape would be. I imagine they're still functional. They probably have some rudimentary capability to sustain operations in some way with radios, but I've been in a lot of European-type bunkers, and they're not exactly what you'd envision from a highly sophisticated combat capability, but they're adequate to go ahead and sustain a military operation from the standpoint of you would maybe have communications and then some sustainability for subsistence, for food, water, that type of thing. But they're fairly robust, they're fairly hardened, and as we find those, we'll go ahead and attack them with the appropriate weapon.
General, does the accelerated pace of attacks on the fielded forces in Kosovo that you've described today suggest less likely that the Apaches will be brought into use at all?
No, not at all. I think the Apaches, once again, is when Sinker decides it's the time he wants to employ them, he'll ask the National Command Authority, and then they'll employ those.
No indication that there's been any assessment made of them being used in the next weeks or days? Or where does that stand?
Once again, I'm not going to talk about when they may or may not be employed for the right reasons, but we have other weapon systems we haven't employed as well, and there are things that we could or could not use, and when the time's right, we'll use those.
General, is there any more information on the bus that was struck by, the civilian bus that was struck? Who was responsible, who you believe was responsible?
Well, what I understand is they've spent a lot of time trying to find out if NATO attacked that bus or accidentally, and there's no indication that we can find whatsoever. Spending a lot of time in BDA on that one, as we do any time, there's possibility of collateral damage, but cannot find any indication on any of the gun camera film or any of the targets or any of the actions that took place yesterday that had anything to do with NATO. And so it looks like something attacked it. You could speculate maybe the VJ or MUP did that, I suppose, but it wasn't NATO that I understand, and we've tried hard to verify that.
Were there NATO aircraft in the area at the time?
Well, there are NATO aircraft in Kosovo at the time, but on that particular area, there were no bombs dropped at all that we know of. And from what I understand, it's not a normal place for buses to travel anyway, but so there's no indication at all that was a NATO attack. So you can speculate how that happened.
Can I just ask you one question about the F-16, MiG-29? Was there HUD footage available, and do you think we'll get to see that?
If there is, I think we will. I think it was at night, so it may be difficult. There may be something where there's a flash ahead of the aircraft someplace, but if there is, I'll try to get it.
General, as you start hitting more targets of opportunities, does the risk of hitting mistaking buses for military vehicles and that sort of thing, hitting the wrong thing, does that go up?
It does go up, and you know, I was trying to get the numbers today. I added it up. I think the numbers of bombs we've dropped, out of those bombs, it's 99.93% of those bombs have not caused collateral damage. So that's 99.93 out of those bombs. Now, so it's going to happen. We talked about this before. We said that we'd probably have aircraft at risk, pilots at risk. We've had some of that. We said there'd be some collateral damage. We've had some of that. But I think over a 1 or 2 day period with that many bombs, that's pretty good. And the fact of the matter is, there have been several times where people haven't dropped bombs, we know that, where they pulled off targets. Now, this is all during the time when they're being shot at. I think if you look at Milosevic's record, I'd say 99.9% of his targets are collateral damage, so you can kind of take it for what it's worth.
Well, regarding the electrical power grid targets, is the sense that, do you know if they're still suppressed? Have they been fixed, or are there workarounds that they've put in place?
I understand it was fairly dark in Fry last night, so I don't know. I imagine eventually they'll do some workarounds, but it's...
You talk about you don't think Milosevic knows how bad off his forces are in Kosovo. I wonder if you could elaborate on it. First of all, it implies an assessment of how bad off they are. If you could fill us in on that. And if he doesn't know, why doesn't he? Is it because communications are cut, or because commanders are reluctant to relate that information back? And if so, what does that say about
Well, some of it's speculation on my part. I mean, I would imagine if I were in the situation he is, what's happening to his command and control, his ability to communicate, his other means of trying to find out. He doesn't have the BDA capability we have, for sure. So for him to be able to get all these things put together from field commanders it would be difficult for anybody, even if the field commanders weren't afraid of the fact they'd have to admit error. So I can only speculate that he probably has no idea totally how bad off he is. I imagine he has a general idea, but he doesn't travel out of Belgrade, doesn't do his own assessments. He doesn't have systems to go around and show him all this. So a concern for him probably would be is how bad off does he really have? Can he even make an estimate of it? It's difficult enough for us to know, even after we've known we've hit targets, because of the BDA requirement of how much of that is damaged or not. Take the tanks, for example. You hit a tank, it looks like it blows up, but our experience is that unless you can get a real good picture of that, sometimes that tank could be possibly repaired. Now, again, you go back to sustainment. For his military sustainment, most of his ability to repair military equipment has been much of it destroyed. His ability to move that equipment back into Serbia to fix it has been degraded because he doesn't have the lines of communication. He doesn't have the spare parts. So he probably really doesn't know how his equipment is holding up necessarily. He doesn't have the ability to have a sheet that says, well, my equipment is 90% functional today.
Is he continuing to talk to commanders there, and can they talk to each other?
Well, there are indications that they do have some workarounds for communication. But once again, if you look at the way NATO is operating from several different countries in Europe, matter of fact, out of the United States, as a matter of fact, and the ability we have to communicate and keep up to speed real time on both the air tasking order, intelligence, communication between the commanders. Even in spite of that, we have to work awfully hard to keep up with a 600 sortie day. And we have outstanding communications. I mean, it's the best. None of ours is down. We have all of our airplanes. We know how they're working. We're getting resupplied. People are being fed. We have all the fuel we need. On the other hand, his people in the field obviously are being destroyed at a deliberate pace over time. It's going to start accumulating. I would say probably 25% of his tanks, APCs, and trucks are destroyed in Kosovo right now.
How many?
About 25%, somewhere in there, about a quarter. Maybe not quite that much, but in that category. So that's got to be a problem for him. If we had 25% of our airplanes down just for maintenance, it would be a problem. We don't. So you start going over time, you have to wonder what's going through his head. What does he really know? And if I were him, I probably wouldn't err on the conservative side.
Do you have a sense of what is left in terms of missile stockpiles for SA-3s and SA-6s? You hit a lot of storage facilities early on.
Well, they have, yeah, and it's a good point because some of those missiles probably were in storage. We don't know. We know that he had a lot of SAMs in the thousands. The problem is his SAM radars, and control equipment is being destroyed, and a big chunk of his SA-3s and SA-6s have been hit. The SA-6s, he had more of those. SA-3s, not as many, and that's being taken down significantly. So his ability to shoot is still there. As long as he's got something he can put it on, he can shoot it ballistically if he wants to. But his ability to have an integrated command and control capability to do that has been degraded, and that's why we're continuing to fly more and more sorties and different types of aircraft.
So you don't actually expect about an inventory concern in terms of the missiles, putting missiles in the air.
I don't see him trying to conserve his missiles per se, but once again, I think if you go back and look over the last few days, there have been quite a few SAMs shot. There were some last night, not as many as the night before, but then again, last night he tried to get some aircraft airborne. When he doesn't shoot a lot of SAMs in the past, at least the first couple of days, he tried to fly with his aircraft, and then he quit after about 2 or 3 days when he didn't have much success. Looks like he tried to go back again last night to try and that same result. So I don't know if it's desperation or stupidity, but one or the other is not working.
Did only one MiG-29 go up last night?
Well, I know of one. There may have been more than one, but we shot one down.
Destroyed on the ground also.
Right. So he doesn't have a lot left, so you can speculate if he had a wing with him. I don't know where he is, but
Do we have an approximate time on that?
I think it was around, it must have been around this morning sometime, Washington time is when I first heard of it. And I think it wasn't too long after I heard it. I think it was around 10 o'clock or something, but don't quote me. You can get the right, something around there.
General, NATO's been able to increase its operations to go to 24-hour strikes.
A couple weeks ago.
Right, without these additional, most of these requested additional aircraft.
Well, some of the NATO allies have sent a few tankers as well in the last few weeks.
So how necessary, though, is sending the majority still that hasn't been sent, that's been requested?
If I were the KOC commander, or the JFAC, or Admiral Ellis at AF South, or General Clark at SACEUR, I would want these tankers because I had a chart here that showed some gaps. Now, that doesn't mean there's a gap where nobody's there, but I want as many airplanes as I can have out there all the time, so when he moves, we destroy him. And when you have more tankers, you can have those airplanes go back and forth to the tanker. You can have them waiting on the tanker, on alert, almost, airborne.
Strike aircraft, you still need some more strike aircraft.
I'm not sure exactly where that stands. I think he may ask for some more, but I think as this continues to increase in ops tempo, we get better daylight. It's going to be more and more difficult for Milosevic to move around, and there's a combination of factors. I mean, he is hurting for fuel. He's got to be hurting for some ammunition. He's got to be hurting for repair and sustainability. He's got to be hurting for command and control, so they're not sure when they move. I'm not sure how their intelligence is. And then when they do move, they're vulnerable to what you saw on TV here or on the imagery. So it's a real problem, and the more we can do that to him, the better it is for us. I mean, so at some point, he's going to have to say, either I have to knock this off because I have to defend my own country, or he'll just continue to be destroyed.
Excuse me, you said about 10 o'clock our time this morning? That would have been Tuesday afternoon when it happened their time, right? The shoot down?
Yeah.
So it was daylight.
Actually,
was it
it's 6
daylight?
hours different, so it would have been this afternoon their time. Right.
So it was a daylight.
Possibly. And that's when I heard. Now, it may have happened earlier than that, Charlie.
General, you showed us some production facilities in one of the photos. Are you referring to primary production oil fields in the north of Kosovo, and what's being done, if anything, to cut the flow of indigenous oil? And secondly, what about the storage facilities for fuel for the power plants? Are they a target?
Well, all the fuel is a target. All the fuel. Wherever we can find it, however he gets it, is a target. It's a military target. So we are trying to keep him from having fuel to move around his war machine. So anything that has fuel attached to it or in it that would be the type of fuel that we would use for military operations is a potential target.
And those production facilities were refinery facilities?
Well, remember, there are 2 production facilities. Okay, major production there where they've made crude oil into actual gasoline-type products. Those are down. There are other ones that do a small amount of modification and some, they put it in types of containers and move it around, but they aren't really their major production where it goes from crude to, so those have been, we're starting to hit those too. Mainly those are for sustainability.
All right, thank you.
General, as you go along now with looking for targets of opportunity and the increased tempo, can you give us a little better idea on, especially in the coming days, how you're doing on taking out tanks, artillery, APCs, other armored vehicles?
Well, I just did. I mean, we're about 25. Right.
Right, but we had a 25% figure almost 10 days ago from...
No, it was about 20% 10 days ago.
So you're doing about 5% in the
Well, I
past
mean,
10
that's
days?
the problem with numbers. Everybody keeps saying, don't say numbers because you'll go down a path of numbers. But the fact of the matter is,
We don't,
the
you know, we
fact of the
don't,
number is it may be more than that, it may
I
be
know.
less, it may be 22.5%, it may be 31%, it may be something, but it's in a category that a big chunk of his tanks are gone.
these are prime targets now in Kosovo, aren't they? The armor and the artillery.
Oh, well, they're all prime targets, but yes, these are prime targets.
So if we could get a running count on it, so we know on a daily basis.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've tried every day to call Milosevic and ask him, and he won't tell me.
No, I mean, your BDA.
Well, like I say, our BDA, I'm telling you every day, if you'd kept track since the beginning, you'd probably have about as good a count as I do. But the fact of the matter is, just like these two, we hit them yesterday. What we'll do is we'll go back and look at a photograph. If they're gone, we don't know if they pulled them off, if they drove off. If they're still there and it doesn't look like the turret's on it anymore, we'll probably call it destroyed. So we go down this path, and our concern is we're going to tell you something that's wrong. And the last thing we want to do is give you bad information, because our credibility means everything. And so suffice it to say, when we show you a picture up here, I've never shown a film twice. Matter of fact, today I showed, I think, maybe 20 films. There were 80 attacks last night. So there are another 60 of those out there someplace that I haven't shown, and that's about the number each day. So you can imagine if I show 2 here, there were, from what I understand last night, there were 16 tanks and APCs total, of APCs and tanks destroyed.
That's a meaningful figure, yeah.
The last couple of days, you've shown us pictures of border posts being destroyed. What is the purpose of that? And I think early on you said that you weren't doing that because of fear of collateral damage when you had, the big lines of refugees and so on.
Yeah, there's a combination. Some are almost like customs buildings, and then the other ones are actual, they're all police, but some do customs work, which there's not a lot of that work going on right now. And some of those are actually military headquarters buildings, or where they're actually staging from. So they're along the border, and they go out and they do their patrols, and they watch the border and that, and so they're a military target, and we're going to continue to take them down, which obviously should cause them a little bit of concern because their border isn't as secure anymore.
Which border are you talking about?
That's along the Albanian border.
So you're taking away their ability to control their border with Albania?
Somewhat, yes.
Are you also hitting the artillery pieces that they moved in to start shelling across the border that were?
Yes, we are. The artillery I showed you today was north of Pristina, but we've hit the artillery along the border as well.
Do you have a sense of what's left of his capability there? Is he-
I don't personally. They move it around a little bit. When we see it, we'll destroy it.
General, the refugees still coming out of Kosovo at the same rate that they were the last couple of days?
I think last night it was a little slower, but I've seen some film and some Predator film that shows the refugees moving around a little bit. I understand that most of them are out of prison now. There's some came out on a train last night, from what I understand, which is unusual, last night into Macedonia. So they continue to move them out, and once again, I can't imagine what he's doing with these people, why he's doing it, but.
And the F-16, CJ, was that the first time the US F-16s have shot down somebody in Allied force?
No. The first MiG-29, of course, was shot down by an F-16 also.
What's the percentage of combat sorties in the 606 that went last night?
I think we're around 50% right now of actual, and once again, got to correct that. Those are people that drop bombs. Now, this F-16 is not counted in that. And I would consider that combat. And so that's CAP. And then the suppression of air defense aircraft, which also he's part of, don't count. So it's usually counting those aircraft up around 70%.
So about 300, though, pre-planned dropping bombs
Right, and then
on
another-
80 target areas, still not 80 single targets, but
Well,
80 target
41
areas.
pre-planned targets.
Right.
And then an additional, almost 40 plus, well, about 40 targets additional to that. And 300 of those aircraft were planned to go out and drop bombs, and there was another probably 250 or so that were in SEAD and suppression of air defense and CAP.
Is this the first time that the number of targets of opportunity was up to the number of pre-planned? I mean,
Gosh, I don't know.
that's unusual, isn't it, so far?
Well, I don't think so. Well, maybe it is. I think yesterday it was like 40, 30 or something. It's going to, I think it'll be continue as long as the weather's good and we have the ability to go ahead and attack. It'll be something like that, I would suspect.
The F-16 that crashed, can you say anything about what happened there?
Once again, We don't have the aircraft, so it's speculation whether it was he had an engine problem, whether it was because it was spotted out or foreign object damage in the engine because of a SAM or AAA, or just quit. We're not sure.
Was it engine failure?
Well, he lost his engine, is what happened. So it could have been because of a number of things. You know, something could have flown into the engine, or he could have just lost it sort of from material. But we can't get to the aircraft, so we can't tell you.
Activity around him?
There was some SAM activity. Mm-hmm.
I have a question about the capture of the 3 soldiers, and maybe this is better for Ken, I don't know, but there is one report out that the way that they were captured was they were surrounded by non-combatants, and then with paramilitary people behind them, and that they couldn't return fire, basically, and that's how they were captured. I don't know whether it's true, but you know anything about that?
In line with my earlier efforts on this, we don't have a complete picture now, and the first part of the debriefing has been almost entirely medical and medical examination, and we're now moving into the stage balancing time that they're spending with their families to get the facts, and I think we should just wait until there's a complete account. Yes, Dale.
To get back to the question about the aircraft that General Clark has requested and haven't been provided yet, I believe it's been about 2 weeks since he made that request. Is part of the reason for the delay that you're just having trouble finding that many aircraft that are available that aren't needed somewhere else and that are serviceable at this point?
No, I've talked about this many times. It's a question of arranging places to put the aircraft so that we can expand the air operations both geographically and in terms of time. And we are working on that. We're have been working on it for a while, and I think are fairly close to being finished. But it's been a 3-part decision. One is basing. The second is then getting the proper mix of aircraft, depending on where the bases are. And then the third is deciding what the force protection and other staffing needs are to operate those bases. Obviously, if we put them at bases that are already well established, fighter bases or tanker bases, you need fewer maintenance people, fewer security people, and fewer flight planners than you might if you were putting them someplace else at a more austere facility. So that's what we're doing. And that basic dynamic hasn't changed over the last couple of weeks. We've been working on the whole package, and I think that we're making a fair amount of progress on it.
I have a question about the early warning radars that you showed us. You showed us 2 that were hit in the last a few days, and I would have thought those are part of the target set that would have been hit in the first, not the first week, but the first few weeks. And I'm wondering why we're still seeing them after 6 weeks popping up. Are these?
The reason is he has a lot of them, and we didn't find them till now.
These are mobile early warning.
They could be moved around, or some of them are turned on. So he's, you know, as you've heard over the last few weeks, has not turned on some of his systems, actually to save them. So I don't think it's because he's feeling more frisky or more able to go ahead and attack aircraft necessarily why he's doing this. I think it's and I'm not an intel expert, but my read on it is he's probably getting a little more desperate and probably doing what he can to try to keep us from bombing him. So he's taking more chances. And I suspect he'll do that more and more over time.
General, on the shoot down again, you said that he attacked the MiG as the MiG appeared to be going after the strike package as it was egressing. Was that strike package by any chance the B-52s that you say had been used?
No.
Okay, thank you.
The other site was struck with HARM missiles because it said it wasn't struck
I think it's
with bombs.
I think that there's one thing you have to know about this release, and one thing you have to know about the incident, that Iraqi air defense systems targeted our planes, and we responded in self-defense. That's the story. Yes, Paul.
I want to make sure that I understand General Wald on one point. The DU shells, have the A-10s actually been firing them in addition to simply carrying them?
Yes.
They have been.
Do you have anything on a report that was on the wires about some bombs that, at least according to the report, fell short in a place called Valjevo, excuse my mispronunciation, that they were apparently aimed at an ammunition site and seemed to fall short within a few hundred yards of a hospital?
I haven't heard that yet. I'll find out and let you know.
Can you update us on the arrangements for the embargo at sea? What's going on with that? When will that start?
Mr. Bacon probably talked to that.
Yeah, they're still working on it. It's, I think the military committee, it went to the NAC. The NAC sent it back to the military committee for more work, and it'll probably take another day or two before it's finished.
Has there been any increase in shipments through the port of Bar while this is being deliberated upon?
Not that I'm aware of. What you have to know is that that the European Union embargo, which is subscribed to now by about 30 countries, went into effect on Friday, and also we issued new regulations barring the export of most products. I think food and medicine is excluded into Bar or Montenegro as well on Friday. So there's been a significant change in the regulatory environment, and NATO will continue to work out the details of the visit and search regime. Otto.
You've been after the command and control in Serbia since day one, and you understand the telephone system is still working. Why is that not considered part of the command and control system?
Some of it's still working, not all of it. Yes.
Question on the first targeting map. There were a whole series of mobility targets in sort of west central Serbia, seeming to go along in lines. Are those fuel tankers on highways, or what are they?
What was the first part of the question?
On your first targeting map, it shows a lot of blue circles.
Those are lines of communication.
But it's sort of not just in one place along. It looks like it's all along.
As you can see, those are the lines of communication going into Kosovo primarily, and we'll continue to move on all of those lines. Are you talking about right here?
Yeah, that whole thing. It almost looks like the rail lines from where the railway goes into Bosnia and then goes on to Kosovo. I don't know.
Well, some of those lines of communication go various places. I mean, and what we're saying, as we said before, is we're going to cut out his ability to. Some of those may go this way and then drop back down toward Kosovo after they get across the bridge. It depends where the bridge needs to be, because the river doesn't always run straight east and west or south and north. So the line there just may happen to go along where a river or something else is. That's normally what a bridge would be over. So, right.
Thank you.